So you want to take your first steps into the world of sim racing, or perhaps you're not interested in taking anything too seriously, and you just want a wheel to have a bit of fun on your favorite racing games. Well, whatever the reason, I'm sure you've already seen or heard of the Logitech G29. And if you haven't, then I'm pleased to say you've landed on the right video, as I want to tell you all about why I believe the Logitech G29 is one of the best entry-level sim racing wheels for someone looking at getting into sim racing on a budget. Now, part of the reason I started this channel in the first place was more or less so I had an excuse to buy cool new tech, or so that I could discover new hobbies that perhaps I wouldn't have thought to try. That said, years ago, before kids, when I had the space for a proper setup, sim racing was actually a pretty big hobby of mine, and I actually used to use the Logitech G29 then too, alongside one of those fancy racing seats, which unfortunately I don't have the space for anymore. So what is it about the now over 10-year-old Logitech G29 that has convinced me to purchase it not just once, but twice? The Logitech G29 wheel and pedals were released in 2015 and were designed to be the successor to the popular Logitech G27. The G29 was designed primarily for the PlayStation 4 and 5, but also works flawlessly on the PC. A few years later, the Logitech G923 was released, which is largely the same as the G29, but offers slightly enhanced force feedback, a more progressive brake spring, Xbox functionality, and has a slightly higher price tag. The G29 almost immediately became the default entry-level setup for most gamers looking for a full-featured sim racing wheel with 3 pedals at an entry-level price point. And that still stands today. Right now on Amazon, you can pick up the G29 and H-Pattern Shifter for just £209, though this is on sale, and I actually got mine with the H-Pattern Shifter for about £265. So let's take a look at what you get with the G29. Inside the box, we have a power brick and cables, the pedals, the wheel itself, and in this particular box, I paid a little extra for the H-Pattern Shifter to be included, which I'll talk more about shortly, but to start with, I'm going to talk about the wheel. The wheel itself is made of really good, strong feeling materials, and is the main unit that the power, pedals, and shifter connect to. The actual wheel is mostly made of metal, hard plastic, and a pleather type material that covers the vast majority of the outer wheel. The wheelbase itself is covered in a lighter plastic and is clamped down to the desk using these clever little twisting locks. You basically keep twisting them until it's clamped down onto your desk, and then you can lock them into place by pushing them down. Alternatively, if you do have a cockpit or racing chair, you can easily mount the wheel using the screw holes in the bottom, though these screws aren't included, but are normally provided with whatever cockpit you purchased. On the wheel itself, we have all the usual buttons that you would get on a typical PlayStation controller, an RPM shift light indicator, some additional plus and minus buttons, and a big old button that sits in the middle of a red rotating dial. These additional buttons and dials can be super useful if you're someone that likes to adjust your setup on the fly. For example, dialing the traction control up or down, or turning on the windscreen wipers. Behind the wheel, we also have 2 metal paddle shifters, which are super responsive and give a really satisfying click noise when pulled. It's also worth noting that the wheel supports up to 900 degrees of rotation, meaning you can turn it about 2.5 times lock to lock, which is pretty similar to a real road car. Now talking about the internals a little, the G29 is a gear-driven wheel. But what does that mean? Well, there are a few different types of sim racing wheels available on the market these days, but I'm going to focus specifically on gear-driven wheels, such as the Logitech G29, and direct drive wheels, which are normally found on more premium wheels. Direct drive wheels offer a much greater level of detail in their force feedback, allowing you to feel subtle effects like tire slides or road imperfections much easier. They have higher torque, ranging from 5 Nm right up to 25 plus, and generally offer a more responsive and precise drive. The downside to these wheels is that they are usually far pricier than their alternatives. Gear-driven wheels, on the other hand, have a much lower torque range, of usually about 2 Nm to 8 Nm, and usually cost significantly less than a direct drive wheel. If this is going to be your first ever sim racing wheel, then you really don't need to worry about feeling road imperfections or have a full 25 Nm of torque pulling you about the place. You can easily pick up all of the basics and even be competitive with this setup. Looking at the pedals next, we have 3 full metal pedals sat on top of a heavy-duty plastic base. On the underside, we have screw holes to mount it to your cockpit if you have one, rubber feet to stop it slipping on a hard floor, or a spiky pop-out grip to stop it sliding on carpet. I have to say though that the rubber feet don't actually do a very good job of stopping it from sliding, and the carpet grip does work very well, but it will eventually start damaging your carpet or rug. I would definitely recommend pressing it against a wall if you can. The pedals only have one position and can't be adjusted, but do all feel feel like they're a good distance apart, and I personally find it very easy to heel and toe shift on these. Each pedal has a very individual feel to it, and it does resemble a car fairly well. For example, the clutch has a linear resistance the whole way through its travel, the brake resists more towards the end of its travel, as though it was actually biting down on brake pads, and the accelerator doesn't have much resistance at all. Overall, the pedals are absolutely fine, but I would point out that I often have to change the brake sensitivity settings in most of my games, just so I don't have to press the brake quite so hard. If you're using the rubber feet, or if you're on a desk chair, then it's almost impossible to put enough pressure down to fully lock the brakes without it sliding out underneath you or pushing you back in the chair. Now, I also mentioned that my box included the H-Pattern Shifter, which is basically an added accessory that you can pick up for an extra 50 or so pounds to get that realistic stick shift experience. Now, on first impression, this thing does feel a little bit flimsy, but I have to say I've been pleasantly surprised at the battering mine has taken. It has 6 gears as well as a reverse gear, and has a similar clamping system to the wheelbase, in that you have 2 dials that you twist and lock down. But this also has an additional screw on the back that helps it stay level and in place. I play quite a lot of rally games, so this stick really has taken quite a beating, but I have to say I've never once had a problem with it. So what is the overall experience of the G29 like? I've mostly been playing games like Assetto Corsa, ACC, iRacing, F1 2020, and Richard Burns Rally, and I have only had good experiences so far. If you have never used a sim racing wheel before, you are going to absolutely love it. The force feedback really helps you understand what the car is doing. Rally games are, in my opinion, where it's most noticeable, as you'll be throwing the car around left, right, and center, and you'll really feel all the bumps and dips in the road. For racing games, where you're on track, you're still going to have an amazing time, but you likely won't notice some of the finer details quite as easily. For example, with a direct drive wheel, you might notice the tires starting to slip out from underneath you when going around a corner. With the G29, you will feel it a bit, but you may need to rely on your ears a little more and listen out for the screeching of your tires before actually feeling the force feedback really kick in, by which point it's normally too late. But this is something that you can overcome with a bit of practice. If you're an experienced sim racer who perhaps, like me, had to get rid of their setup, but is now looking to get something more budget-friendly to get back into the hobby, then you will absolutely love this wheel for what it is. It's probably also worth noting that the internals of the wheelbase itself can be a little noisy as a result of it being gear-driven. When in use, it will rumble the desk it's clamped on quite a bit. So if you're using this upstairs, the people downstairs will probably hear it. In regards to compatibility, the G29 is specific to PlayStation and the G923 is specific to Xbox. However, both wheels will work perfectly fine on PC and are compatible with pretty much every PC racing game out there. In fact, one of the perks to the G29 being such a popular wheel is that there are hundreds of different setups and profile guides online to help you really dial in your wheel for whatever game you're playing by using either the Logitech G Hub app or whatever in-game settings are available. So why do I think the Logitech G29 is the best budget wheel on the market right now? Well, firstly, the price. You're getting an unbelievable amount of value from this wheel. 3 pedals, good materials, and like I said earlier, you can often pick this wheel up at a heavily discounted rate and can even get the H-Pattern Shifter thrown in for just a couple of bucks more if you get lucky. And because they're so popular, you can usually find one secondhand online for about £150 or less. Second, it's just so reliable. I bought my first G29 secondhand and I used it most days for a good year or 2 with no signs of it giving up. Even the H-Pattern Shifter that I thought was a bit flimsy and frail to begin with proved otherwise. And third, it's super beginner friendly. No matter what game you're playing, there is nearly always a pre-configured Logitech G29 setup ready to go. And even when there's not, there's usually a guide hiding behind a quick Google search to walk you through the setup. Now, of course, the G29 does have some downsides. It's gear driven, so it does have a bit of a dead zone when centered, and obviously isn't as precise as a direct drive wheel. The pedals aren't really anything to write home about either. They're more than good enough, but they're far from the best. But at just £200 to get you on the virtual road, these compromises don't bother me in the slightest. So should you buy the Logitech G29? Well, if you want the best balance of price, reliability, and just straight up fun, then the beginner-friendly Logitech G29 is, in my opinion, still the ultimate budget entry-level sim racing wheel. It's not the newest, it's not the most powerful, but more than 10 years later, it's still one of the easiest and cheapest ways to get into sim racing. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.